The tough anti-violence measures are part of the State Education Department's effort to make school playgrounds safe.
The days of putting teachers at risk, students' learning or safety at risk for the sake of one or two students who are misbehaving is well and truly over.
Well, we don't have a problem. We do have the odd case where one student bashes up another one. Then, of course, the police would be called. But we haven't had any serious cases at all.
But despite this, special teaching kits aimed at dealing with aggressive and disruptive students will be used in the region's 265 primary and secondary schools from next month. As well, principals now have stronger powers of expulsion and can refuse to enrol students with histories of violence.
There's greater delegation to the principal, and that is important so that the principal feels he's in control or she's in control and, of course, can act on the spot.
To date, there have been no cases of violence in Hunter Region schools involving a weapon. An enviable record the Education Department is hoping to keep.
It simply isn't tolerated that there's violence in schools. Children, when they come to school, the students just need to feel safe, and that is our objective, so we will do whatever is possible.
Melinda Smith, NBN News.
It's no secret tourism is emerging as one of the Hunter's growing industries, and many of the region's attractions are obvious. But judging by the response to the first ever local tourism awards, there's much more to valley tourism than meets the eye.
There's a lot of people in the Hunter Valley doing some really initiating things and doing something for tourism, and we thought that these people should be recognised. We've received entries from all parts of the Hunter Valley, from Muswellbrook, Scone, Lake Macquarie and the Great Lakes Shire.
John and the team at Morpeth Promotions have been working on the awards for nearly a year. Dozens of businesses have entered in 14 categories. It's hoped the awards will encourage local operators to work together, fostering a collective push for the tourist dollar rather than an independent grab. And what did the judges look for?
We want people to do something to bring tourism to their area, an initiative. Something different. It doesn't have to be a big budget item, but something new.
Dr David Legg is a senior researcher at the National Centre for Epidemiology and Population Health in Canberra. During a public lecture at Newcastle University, Dr Legg said our health policy is directed by economic forces, causing it to reflect Australia's increasingly polarised society, which largely consists of rich and poor sectors with little in between. As a result, two health systems are emerging, one for the wealthy and one for the not so well off.
More or less sort of luxurious health system for the people who've got the two-income families who've got jobs who are reasonably well off, and a residualist system for that's to say a safety net health system for.
It's society's poorer sector, he believes, will suffer most.
Increasing access barriers to poor people getting necessary care is the particular one, but secondly, the consequence of a polarised society is increasing inequalities in health standards.
He says the way to stop this is to allow greater community input into health policy decision-making. Dr Legg hopes to increase the community's awareness that it's just as responsible for improving and shaping health policies as are the politicians.
So that everyone should take more seriously the economic debates.
Catherine Lamont, NBN News.
There was little neighbours could do once fire took hold in the Victoria Street house about 4 o'clock this morning.
I was woken up by the windows or loud explosions coming out from the back here.
Tangled garden hoses and buckled planks on the house next door hinted of the fire's ferocity. An elderly resident escaped the burning house, but in the confusion wasn't sure whether a mate had made it out.
Yeah, he was sitting out on the backyard, laying out there, and the people next door had a blanket over him and were looking after him. He said there was a guy living with him and was unsure whether he was outside or still inside.
Firefighters later found the body of a man in a burnt-out bedroom. Although not yet positively identified, he's believed to be aged in his 40s and from Adamstown. Initial investigations suggest the victim may have been smoking in bed. In a response to the recent spate of house fire deaths, Newcastle City Council is urging homeowners to consider installing smoke detectors. Andrew Lobb, NBN News. As sure as the Hunter and Williams rivers wind to the sea, so too there's a tide of rubbish and debris generated by people along the way.
Like anything's turned up, from car bodies to logs. Obviously there's a lot of timber that comes down this river, and I don't think we could get all that out, but mainly a lot of plastic-based things. The odd cow we find, which is standard for this river, but basically it's been a lot of hardware, fridges, things like that that have just been dumped over the bank over the years and just remained in the area.
Newcastle, Maitland and Port Stephens councils chipped in and, together with the MSB Waterways, hired a heavy lift barge to begin the clean-up of accumulated junk. Others from water skiing, aquatic clubs and local businesses also volunteered their time and boats. A number of slimy skirmishes were fought with offending eyesores entrenched along the banks from Newcastle to Morpeth and Seaham, leaving the river just a little bit cleaner. It was a chance for brides-to-be, their mothers and fiancés, to sit back for just a little while, forgetting all the fuss of planning for that big day, and to take in the splendour of brides on parade. Wedding day whims and wishes waltzed by, and the blokes weren't left out either. There was a display for groovy grooms and their best men. The Newcastle Wedding Connection was a cooperative effort on the part of bridal houses, hiring outfits, decorators, caterers and jewellers throughout the region. Patrons to many of the area's dozens of theatres were often asked by the usher if they'd like tickets for the front stalls or back. Most of the suburbans didn't have dress circles like the grander city theatres, and most struggled to fill live shows, eventually opting for big screens and movies. Many theatres, once focal points of community life, are now gone forever, and it's taken two Sydney-siders to dig up the past. Kevin Cork and Les Todd, both members of the Australian Theatre Historical Society, were given the red carpet treatment at one of Newcastle's last live suburban theatres, the Kings at Lambton, to launch their book.
People have got so much to tell you, so many memories that they want to share. They bring up photographs, programs, stories of how they courted their wives and, then later took their children back to the same theatre.
Late licensing for pubs, clubs and television all added to the gradual demise of picture shows. Others bowed out in more spectacular style, like the old Masonic Hall in Stockton or the Century lost to the 1989 earthquake.
Something like that, a catastrophe of that nature, can destroy part of your social heritage.
But I like the story about the Newcastle municipal bars that used to be in New Common Street. I think it was around the time of World War I that during winter they would empty the bars out and fill it with chairs and drop a sheet at the end and use it as a picture theatre.
For the 10,000 teachers in the 550 Catholic schools throughout New South Wales, the pay rise would result in the same wage now enjoyed by their colleagues in Christian community and grammar schools. The Independent Teachers Association is seeking a 4.9% increase to be phased in over the next 2 years.
We've sought it for all of our members who haven't received an increase since August 1991 is to last them until 1995, so that's a 4-year period where we're seeking an increase of around 5%. That's less than the inflation rate, so it's a very modest increase.
The problem has escalated with some independent Catholic schools agreeing to the wage rise. More than 100 disgruntled teachers met in Newcastle today to plan industrial action, the first of many meetings to be held across the state.
Sydney, Newcastle, Tamworth, Armidale, Wagga, Bathurst, a range of other places, about 12 all up, and we're hoping the outcome will be that teachers in those meetings will vote for a 24-hour stoppage on the 30th of August.
According to Catholic employers, government funding keeps school fees to a minimum. They say they can't afford any wage rise until a general pay increase is awarded to teachers in state schools.
This isn't a big increase. It will not impact upon fees. Fees will not go up by the amount that they claim. In fact, fees will not have to go up at all, given the large increases in Commonwealth funding that Catholic schools are receiving over the next 2 years.
Queensland in the maroon and white yesterday accounted for the New South Wales Development Squad 4-1, and today they did much the same against the Northern Territory. The Territory goalie stood her ground early in the game and pulled off some good saves. However, the sheer number of times the Queenslanders mounted raids against her goal meant that something had to give. The Northern Territory forwards were probably just as good, but were very rarely given a chance. Last year, Queensland had 4 players named in the Australian squad, and already they appear to be putting a mortgage on a few places again. New South Wales have entered 2 teams, a first 15 and a development squad. The first 15 are so far undefeated. However, the development squad this afternoon played South Australia. Both teams were a pretty even match, but the Sandgropers eventually won 4-0.
Hunter Valley Grammar School students turned on a show for Colleen Fay. On behalf of her husband, Mrs Fay officially opened the school's new fully computerised library. Partly state government subsidised, the $600,000 complex has computer labs, electronic cataloguing, seminar rooms and a media drama theatre. This is stage 1 of the school's $1.6 million building program. The final stage is a new art, design, technology building due for completion next year.
Kostya hardly had time to unpack his bags this afternoon before Johnny Lewis had him in the ring against Justin Rousell. With a week to go before the fight, boxers normally do not spar in case they're accidentally cut or injured. So it's a true mark of concern that Lewis doesn't think Kostya has had enough hard minutes.
So I'd like to think that we'd come up here today and have it all behind us, a week away from the fight, but what we've got to do, You can't always do something the way you want it to be done.
Lewis has no doubts, though, that Kostya will win and be on his way to challenge for a world title later this year.
If I start talking to you about what I think about Costa, we'll be here for an hour. So, we're confident, as we would be if we fought anybody in the world.
And in typical Russian fashion, Kostya has an answer for Bramble's claim that he'll put him to sleep.
He talked by his mouth and talked by my hand.
Livingston Bramble was half an hour late for his training session this afternoon and took twice as long to finally climb into the ring to begin his warm-up. Bramble loves to dance and does all his training to reggae music and was more than happy to show off his fancy footwork. But that's where the cooperation finished. When it came time to spar, Livingston decided that he didn't want any pictures taken of his workout and ordered the cameraman leave the room. However, we can report that his sparring partner, Newcastle's Lance Hobson, did land 3 or 4 good blows on his nose. Darren Curtis, NBN News.
Lake Macquarie residents now dump their rubbish at Awabba and Redhead tips, but by the end of March next year, a waste transfer station will be operating in place of the rapidly filling Redhead tip. The station, which will cost Council $160,000 a year, will be built at Gateshead on 2.5 hectares of land owned by Saywood Proprietary Limited. Mayor John Kilpatrick says Council has addressed all environmental concerns.
Well, we've got extra land for the parking, we've got a better flow-through traffic plan, and we have put, I think, some very stringent controls on the environmental aspects that were concerning the neighbours particularly.
The transfer station will take around 50,000 tonnes of rubbish a year from the eastern side of the lake. Trucks will then transport the compacted material to Awabba tip. Council estimates Awabba will last until the year 2010, helped along by a recycling facility at the transfer station.
We've made extra provision there for recycling in the hope that, well, in the expectation actually, that over the next 10 years there will be a greater emphasis on recycling.
Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Police were called to the National Australia Bank in Hunter Street West soon after 1. Just minutes earlier, a bandit carrying a sawn-off rifle had threatened staff, grabbed a sum of money and raced into the street. With the alarm raised, scores of police combed the area, detectives passing on information to cars on the road. The robber's getaway vehicle was soon found just a kilometre down the road in a car park at the Radisson Hotel. A maintenance worker noticed the car, the engine still idling, and reported it. With the lunch hour rush in Hunter Street, police believe someone may have seen the bandit leaving the bank and have called for any witnesses to contact them. He is described as around 20 years old, with bad acne, 180 centimetres tall and brown collar-length hair. He was wearing a tweed cap. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
One of the major commitments of the Honeysuckle project is to replace the existing timber bridge over Throsby Channel linking Wickham and Carrington. The Honeysuckle Development Corporation has now released the concept design for the replacement, which it believes will have significant benefits.
It's proposed to have 2 lanes across the bridge with 2 dual carriageways for pedestrians and cycle movements, and it's going to have a height of about 3.5 metres, which will allow small craft to go up the northern end of Throsby Creek and use that water area, which at the moment is inaccessible.
A development application will be lodged in coming weeks. The contract for construction of the new Cowper Street Bridge is expected to be let early next year, with the project to be completed by mid-1995. Meantime, the Lower Hunters to see further bridge work, with the Roads and Traffic Authority calling tenders for the construction of 2 bridges as part of the Raymond Terrace bypass. A 28-metre long single-span structure will be built over Mount Hall Road, while the 2-span 70-metre bridge will go over Richardson Road. Tenders close September 15.
About 400 students and parents were at Waratah Oval for the quarter-final of the prestigious Under-14 Boys contest. In the tradition of schoolboy football, the game was a spectacle of young talent and enthusiasm. Dapto, playing in the yellow and red tops, took a narrow 14-12 lead after this crossfield chip was pounced on by Michael Finch. In a seesawing match, Waratah 5/8 Troy Saxby weaved through a hive of Dapto players to score this great individual try just before half-time, putting his team in front 18-14. Dapto High came out firing in the second half, with lock Paul Del Santo scoring this try to level the scores 18-all. However, with 10 minutes left in the game, Waratah regained its lead with this try to halfback and captain Ben Donaldson. 5/8 Troy Saxby sealed the victory 28-18 with another solo effort. Waratah will play its semi-final opponent in 2 weeks.
It was probably one of the ugliest pieces of boxing in Newcastle for years. After a few dramatic rounds, Craig Peavy was disqualified for intentionally headbutting Justin Rousell. A rematch a few months later was postponed because Rousell's eye hadn't healed. Craig Peavy says the wait to get back into the ring against each other has left a fire in his belly.
The only thing I think when I get in the ring now to fight Justin is he stopped me from becoming the best, and I'm going to pull his head off.
Rousell says he's just as determined but a bit wiser for the earlier bout.
Let's just say once bitten, twice shy. I don't think his head's going to get within a cooey of me.
Peavy says after 15 years of sweating and putting his body on the line without the chance for a world title, a loss on Monday night at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre will finish his career.
If he beats me fair and square, I will retire on the night.
Well, if that's the case, maybe I'll have to, because I'm going to win on Monday night. That's definite. I know that 100%.
To make sure he's fully prepared, Rousell has been sparring with Kosh Jizu. One thing for sure, though, is there's bound to be blood spilled between Rousell and Cardiff's favourite boxing son on Monday night. Darren Curtis, NBN News.
"48-year-old Donald Munro of no fixed address has been charged with using an offensive implement and malicious damage. The charges relate to an incident in the early hours of Tuesday morning. 2 police officers attended a domestic argument at his home in Gilgai. Police allege the defendant attacked them with a large heavy object, and during the incident, Munro was shot by one of the officers. He was held at the scene until ambulance crews arrived and was taken to Inverell Hospital. No plea or application for bail was made in court this morning. Donald Munro has been remanded in custody and will appear in Inverell Court on September the 9th. Right from the word go, the Queensland side looked like a smart outfit, leaving the previously strong New South Wales side constantly on the defensive. Dressed in their state's traditional colours, Queensland dominated the first half, and with attempts like this one, Queensland was unlucky not to score early. But whatever the Blues coach said to her side at half-time seemed to work. New South Wales looking like a new team in the second half. With attempts by both teams to put points on the scoreboard falling by the wayside, both sides were getting frustrated. A short time later, Karen Smith converted a short corner, giving Queensland the lead. That seemed to add fuel to New South Wales' fire. Captain Kimberly Robard struck back a few moments later. Neck and neck with only 10 minutes to go, you could be forgiven for thinking this was a grand final. Once again, Queensland's Karen Smith brought the Maroons out of a tight situation, scoring again. Queensland won the match 2-1. Games continue tomorrow.
Few people who follow the Knights could forget that cold and windy night at Tweed Heads when the Gold Coast got their only competition points for the year. A couple of dubious decisions and some ordinary defence let the goals fly high. That win hurt, and everyone will be out to redress the last result, and farewell Michael Hagan, David Boyd, Adrian Brunker and Tony Kemp with a thumping win. Mark Sargent will only be able to offer his support from the sideline though, a finger injury keeping him out. All the players who are leaving have played a major role with the Knights on and off the field, and you can expect a few tears on Sunday when the final siren goes.
Little Olivia is a healthy baby, but she is still at risk of sudden infant death syndrome or cot death. Previously, only a handful of children at Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital had their sleeping patterns monitored, but now up to 200 babies a year will lie on this bed and be safe. The mattress monitors the baby's every movement, their sleeping pattern, heart rate and oxygen levels. Research into the syndrome has shown that certain babies are more at risk. They'll be closely watched, giving their parents more peace of mind.
A lot of people who are ex-prematures and often children who perhaps brothers and sisters of children who've died of cot death. They're our primary high-risk groups.
Sharon Townley knows what it's like to have a child at risk. Her 2.5-month-old son Matthew was having difficulty breathing and admitted to hospital, but the equipment to monitor him wasn't available for 2 weeks.
Well, that's when I went home and my sister-in-law Sandra and cousin Laree, we decided to do something about it.
Sharon and her family have raised $25,000. An $8,000 cheque was handed over today by BHP. It's only a small drop in what's required to investigate the disorder, but Dr Gus Cooper is confident it will save lives. Without this kind of help, research into the syndrome would be impossible.
We're entirely dependent on this sort of fundraising, entirely dependent on it, unfortunately.
The weigh-in was set down for 11:30 and all the boxes were there but Livingston Bramble. Promoter Bill Morty had sent a car to pick him up from his motel, but he kept the driver waiting. With valuable eating time slipping away and no show by Bramble, things were starting to look bleak. No sooner had the time limit been set and the latecomer strolled in. His first weigh-in put him half a kilo overweight. He was told by officials that he had to drop to the limit. Initially he refused and walked out, demanding that another set of scales be used. After nearly an hour of haggling, Bramble decided to get into the sauna and try and sweat the weight off. He then complained that the sweat was caught in his hair and made him heavier. Finally, he stood on the scales and was still over. By now, tempers were starting to fray, and despite Kostya weighing in earlier, Bramble's camp wanted him back on the scales, even though he was given the all-clear to drink and eat. Kostya passed without a drama. Bramble tried again, but once more complained the scales were wrong. His attorney then threatened to call it all off. Finally, Kostya's trainer gave in and agreed to let Bramble fight over the limit.
I think really the only reason we did this was because there would have been 4,000 disappointed fans out there, and these people have got behind Kostya. They would have been grossly disappointed, but if they knew what went on here today, I'm sure that their support for Kostya tonight will almost lift the roof off the stadium.
Former champ turned commentator Jeff Fennick believes the fight will go 5 rounds.
When Kostya hits you, you stay knocked out, whether he cuts your eye, hits you in the chin, hits you in the head, you're knocked out.
In the main preliminary bout, Craig Peavy and Justin Rousel will slog it out again. Both fighters came in underweight, however Peavy didn't miss with the sledging. The fight is a near sellout, but to make sure people in Newcastle can still see the fight live due to the Sky Channel blackout, big screens have been set up next to the entertainment centre.
The week of festivities kicked off last night aboard the South Stain, but that's not where they end.
There will be a bingo and board game night tonight at Cardiff, RSL Club, and all members of the public are invited to come tonight. And on Saturday night there will be a Deaf Pride Ball, which is to enable people of the hearing community and the deaf community come together and rave and have a good time here.
This morning, staff at Newcastle City Library highlighted the facilities they offer the disabled, including a host of material for the deaf. But in the wider community, it seems much more is needed, including telephone typewriters or TTY, which enable the deaf to have the same direct access to services as Making the public aware of the deaf community's needs is just one of the aims of Deaf Pride Week.
Bring normal people that bring normal people for just stay thinking a different way, in a different language, that's all, yeah.